Hello, my name is George Yacus, and I'm running for the U.S. House of Representatives here in Virginia's District 3. I'm standing outside the Portsmouth Federal Building. I want to talk a little bit about my professional experience, including when I worked here for 14 years in the Coast Guard. The work that I did when I was in the federal government dealt with looking at an organization's mission, figuring out what their vision was, helping them create strategic plans, and to be able to look at those plans and execute them, and then assess them, see if their performance was good, and then finally how to recommend them to be better. In fact, our saying that we used when we were performance consultants here at the Coast Guard was, "We make the Coast Guard better." I started out here as a contractor in 1999. I was in charge of doing the regional strategic assessment. We would look at all the things that were going on in the world, doing environmental scanning, and then trying to determine what the Coast Guard needed to do next. What did we need to buy next? So I worked with both the Atlantic area, which is about 2/3 of the Coast Guard, everything on the East Coast, and then I worked with districts 1, 5, 7, 8, and 9. District 1 being Boston, District 5 being here in Portsmouth, 7 being in Miami, District 8 being in New Orleans, and District 9 being in Cleveland. So that was the turf that we used. Stop. I enjoyed my tour when I was there as a Fed at the Coast Guard Atlantic area and 5th District. I had a dozen business consultants working for me from all over the eastern part of the United States. We would do strategic planning for some of the units. We'd go to Coast Guard air stations, and we'd go to cutters, and we'd go to other marine safety offices and try to help them improve their management practices. We did what we call a Baldrige-based assessment. Malcolm Baldrige National Quality Award had 7 areas that gives you a snapshot of how well an organization's being managed. So we'd look at their leadership, we'd look at their strategic planning, we'd look at their customer focus, we'd look at their knowledge and information management, we'd look at how they manage their human resources, how they operated in their processes, and then finally at their results, whether they were actually achieving what they were supposed to be achieving. So the Baldrige framework is really very powerful. I also sponsored a leadership lunch every month. I'd buy pizza and we'd watch good training videos. And I also took those training videos and included them in what I called Coast Guard Netflix, where units could order a video on how to, better public speaking or strategic planning or whatever it might be. And they were very useful. I applied to the Executive Potential Program. It's a federal program, and out of all the Coast Guard every year they only select very few, and I got selected to do that, and that was really a wonderful learning experience. I also was a part of the Coast Guard Innovation Council. So we would gather all the Coast Guard innovations from all over. People came up with really good ideas, and we would evaluate them and see which ones were the very best, and we would present them to the Commandant, and sometimes we would even have a Coast Guard Innovation Expo. So I think it was one of the best innovation programs in the federal government at the time. I've also applied to the Leadership Advisory Council. Again, you had to be selected to be on this, and we would brief the Commandant of the Coast Guard every year on different leadership ideas, things that would make our leadership better. Likewise, after I was on the LAC, I was on the Diversity Advisory Council. We wanted to make sure that the Coast Guard was diverse, and all the, every race and every color would have an opportunity to excel while within the Coast Guard, getting, good training and just doing things to improve the racial quality and climate for the Coast Guard. I was involved as a facilitator in restructuring the Coast Guard. We've really changed our format organizationally since when I was first there in 2000. And then when I was done at the Atlanta area, I went to the Coast Guard's Finance Center, and there I was the chief of the Process Improvement and Training Branch, which was, again, I used a lot of Lean Six Sigma. So the Coast Guard was a lot of fun, and I really felt that I made quite a bit of difference in making the Coast Guard better. So after I left working with the Coast Guard in about 2013 or so, after the Finance Center, I went to the Department of Energy. My wife said, "Hey, make sure you point out that we have a Prius. We've been driving this old Prius around since 2006. And she said, "Yeah, you ought to talk about the panels up on the roof as well," which we have both hot water solar panels as well as PEVs for photoelectric voltaic. So we're kind of energy-minded people. We went to that when I did go up in 2014, I went to the Office of Fossil Energy and the Office of Productivity and Sustainability. Really liked this job. We did a lot of process improvement. I came out with over 24 standard operating procedures. Whether somebody was checking in or going on foreign travel or whatever the situation might be, I developed standard, repeatable processes that people could follow every time. When we were done with there, I also did some work at the National Energy and Technology Laboratories, NETL, up in Pittsburgh and Morgantown, Pennsylvania. Well, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania and Morgantown, Virginia. And did a lot of major projects up there. We had one big project that we did it was a process that we did every year, and we probably by this time have saved over $2 to $3 million from doing that process more efficiently. So that was pretty exciting. So that's the start of my Department of Energy tour. And now I'm going to go change my shirt so I can talk about the National Nuclear Security Administration. Once I was finished with my fossil energy tour at DOE, I went to the National Nuclear Security Administration, NNSA. Their particular mission is to look out for the nation's nuclear stockpile, to make sure that there is a threat of nuclear proliferation is kept in check, and finally taking care of the Navy's nuclear propulsion systems. So my particular job, I worked with the office in the management and budget areas, and I was the quality director in that area. So we would go and we would do assessments of major facilities that worked with nuclear weapons. I made a tour down to New Mexico and looked at the Los Alamos National Laboratory and did some other assessments as well. So that was exciting and responsible work. So in conclusion, I think that my takeaways are that I improved every organization that I worked with, whether it was the Coast Guard or the Department of Energy. I think I was a very competent supervisor and director. I think I had good leadership. I made it up to the GS-15 level at one point. I was an expert in quality management and process improvement, so I think it's important to focus on what we're doing and how we could be doing it better. And then finally, my vision is to bring excellence to the federal government. I'm out here in front of the City Hall for the City of Chesapeake and wearing my City of Chesapeake Local Emergency Planning Committee shirt. For one point, for several years, I was the co-chair of LEPC, Local Emergency Planning Committee, and I also worked at the one in Portsmouth. I did strategic planning for both of these. What does this committee do? Our vision was to approach crisis with competence. So whether we had a natural disaster or a man-made disaster, my job, along with my colleagues, was to try to prepare Chesapeake to be better prepared to be able to face whatever type of situation we found ourselves in. So we did a lot of worked with a lot of other agencies, both federal and local and state, to make us disaster resistant. The LEPCs, I think, were very valuable because it shows the citizens, we were getting them prepared. We were sending out red books that people could get to talk about what you would do in an emergency. When we had major hurricanes, the flooding was a very big issue many years back. So we were trying to make sure that we had ways to facilitate the evacuation of like the Outer Banks and the cities to be able to deal with a major, Category 5 hurricane. Another thing that I've been involved with in my professional extracurricular activities has been the Senate Productivity and Quality Award of Virginia, SPQA we call it. It's using those Baldrige categories that I talked about earlier. I was an examiner, I was a team leader. I'm a current board member, I've been a member there for a while of SPQA. We look at companies, we look at federal organizations, Virginia and DC and Maryland, and we try to help make them better using the Baldrige-based criteria. Several of our school systems here in, I guess it's in Chesapeake and Virginia Beach and Norfolk, have gone through this SPQA training and improvement. I'm also a board member at the Idlewild Christian Enterprises. It's a church camp. I've been on that board for many, many years. I'm a former president and board member of Community Alternatives Incorporated. We take care of serving special needs individuals, and we try to maintain and improve their quality of life because they need special care. I've also been a member of the Chesapeake Jail Ministry here for Chesapeake, and I've also been a member of a Tidewater Emergency Management Services Board. This is local Tidewater first responders, fire chiefs, police chiefs, sheriffs, and so forth, and we work at being able to respond, especially like ambulance services, setting certain standards so ambulances have the right medicines on board and qualified people to be able to help you when they show up at your door. I was also a member of the Chesapeake Boys and Girls Club. Unfortunately, when I moved up to Washington, I kind of had to discontinue some of that, but I've been a supporter of them. And finally, I want to talk a little bit about the Federal Improvement Team. I was the chair of that, working up in Washington, D.C. We had all sorts of probably 20 or 30 federal agencies, and we would use Lean Six Sigma. We would share our resources. I would do training for people like EPA and others, USDA, and we would share materials and training methods, and we were just trying to improve so we could work smarter, not harder, throughout federal government. So Lean Six Sigma is a very powerful methodology. The corporate people use it all the time. Anytime you go into a bank or a fast food restaurant or a hotel, they have all improved their processes using Lean Six Sigma, and I think we can use that very effectively in government. So in closing, I just want to say that these boards and committees that I've been on, the extracurricular ones, and also my federal service, I think you're getting not a bargain necessarily, but I think you're getting a very qualified person who can go and help government solve some of the problems that we face, especially here in Virginia's 3rd District. Thanks for watching.